Lane hasn't been on good behavior in state prison either. In July, we're told he spent time in segregation for a charge of self-mutilation, including getting a tattoo.
The thrill of high school sometimes could turn into a nightmare filled with violence. So today we're exploring the motives behind some of the most horrific mass murders and the turbulent lives of teenage killers like TJ Lane, even after committing their crimes. This is what happens to teen mass murderers in prison. On March 1998, after months of careful planning, 13-year-old Mitchell Johnson and 11-year-old Andrew Golden carried out this horrific attack at their Arkansas middle school. They would kill 5 people and injure 10 before they were caught. Now, despite what people might think, Johnson and Golden weren't close friends. They barely knew each other, just rode the same school bus. Johnson was in 7th grade and Golden was in 6th. They were different in every way, yet they both had a dark and violent side.
I can't say that I wasn't mad at nobody, that I didn't mean to kill nobody.
Johnson had a tough home life and a rocky relationship with his dad. To make things even more complicated, his mom had married an inmate from prison where she worked as a guard. People who knew Johnson said he was quiet and polite. He would go to church and sing in the choir. But his classmates had a different story. They said he was a bully who talked about wanting to join the Bloods and smoke weed. He also had a grudge against a teacher named Shannon Wright. At the same time, Golden seemed like a good kid on the surface, nice, happy, popular with adults. He liked shooting guns and had won awards for his precision. But what people didn't know was that Golden was secretly using his shooting skills to hunt and kill innocent animals. And so when Johnson and Golden realized they both had twisted desires, disaster was bound to happen. Now, a few days before their sinister plan, they had stolen weapons and thousands of rounds of ammo from Golden's grandpa. They would pack it into Johnson's mom's van, along with camping gear and snacks, and they were all set for their twisted plan. March 24th, 1998, on the morning of the massacre, the boys skipped the bus and drove the van to their school. They would park it behind the school in the woods, and at 12:30 p.m., Golden pulled the fire alarm. Now, as students and teachers would evacuate, the boys shot from the woods, aiming for the heads and chests of whoever. They even yelled, "It's all fake," to confuse their victims. The attack would last about 10 minutes until they ran out of ammo. They would try to escape in the van, but police had arrived just in time to stop them. The tragic event led to the deaths of 4 students and 1 teacher, Shannon Wright, who Johnson loathed. She heroically sacrificed herself to protect a 6th grader. Now, despite committing such a heinous crime, Johnson and Golden were too young to be tried as adults, so they faced juvie court and were found guilty of 5 counts of murder and 10 counts of assault. In August 1998, they were sentenced to confinement until they turned 21, which was the maximum punishment allowed by Arkansas law. During their time at juvie, Johnson and Golden were supposed to undergo rehabilitation programs to help them change their ways and prepare them for reintegration into society. They received counseling, education, and vocational training, and were closely monitored. But despite all of it, Johnson's time behind bars did nothing to reform him, and he remained drawn to guns and drugs. On August 11th, 2005, Johnson was released from the Federal Correctional Institution when he turned 21. However, just 2 years later, he found himself in trouble again. This time he was caught with a loaded gun and marijuana in his car. After being released on a $1,000 bond, Johnson would get into more trouble. He was arrested again for stealing a debit card from a disabled man at the gas station where he worked, as well as again possessing more marijuana. October 7th, 2008, Johnson was sentenced to 12 years behind bars. The judge expressed disappointment in Johnson's lack of reform, stating, "No matter your sentence, you still have a life. Those killed in 1998 do not." However, in July 2015, Johnson was released under federal probation supervision and would enter a drug rehab program. However, details about his activities since then remain a mystery. Next up, we have another teenage mass murderer whose time in juvenile detention failed to reform him as well, but ultimately led his state to change the law. In 2005, schoolteacher Candy Williams thought she had met the man of her dreams on a Florida beach. They quickly moved in together and started planning their wedding. What Candy didn't know was that her new love interest was actually a former teen mass murderer. In May 1983, sheriff deputies in Mineral Point, Wisconsin, made a gruesome discovery. Hans Zimmer was found shot 5 times on his back porch, with his wife Sally and youngest son Perry found murdered inside the home. The prime suspect, the Zimmer Zimmer's 14-year-old adopted son, Peter. Peter was quickly apprehended and pled guilty to the murders, but instead of being sent to a state penitentiary, he served just over a year for each murder at Ethan Allen School for Boys due to his age. Peter claimed that he was driven to kill his family because of his father's abuse, lack of protection from his mother, and jealousy towards his brother, who was favored by their parents because he was their biological son. And despite evident mental issues, Peter refused psychiatric help and focused on securing his family's estate as the sole surviving heir. And guess what? The law ended up falling in his favor. In 1987, Peter walked free with a new identity, Jovan Collier. He married twice, had kids, and kept his dark past hidden from his partners. He would even lie about his parents' death, saying that they were killed in an accident caused by a drunk driver. Now Peter, or Jovan, also reconnected with his biological mother and introduced her to his new fiancée, Candy. However, things took a turn when he claimed that his mother was bad-mouthing Candy and decided to cut ties with her. In reality, his mom had found out about his criminal past and decided to keep her distance. Now Candy eventually learned about Jovan's dark history and ended their relationship. This would lead to a series of threatening emails from Jovan, which led Candy to get a restraining order, especially after he threatened her with a knife. In October 2009, Jovan was charged with felony stalking and sentenced to 3.5 years in a Florida state prison. The case of Jovan Collier, formerly known as Peter Zimmer, sheds light on the flaws of the juvenile justice system in reforming troubled teens and addressing their deeply rooted mental health issues, allowing them to continue a life of deception and crime after their release. And as a result, his case would spark outrage, leading to significant legal changes in Wisconsin. The new laws now allow juveniles as young as 14 to be charged as adults in certain cases and prevent anyone guilty of homicide from benefiting from their victims' estates. February 1st, 2008, the Baltimore suburb of Cockeysville, Maryland, experienced a tragic event that would forever change this community. Nicholas Browning, just a few days shy of his 16th birthday, left his friend's house in the middle of the night, returned home, and used his father's gun to kill his entire family while they slept. Nicholas took the lives of his parents, John and Tamara Browning, as well as his younger brothers, Gregory and Benjamin. Now we're all wondering why would he do such a thing? Nicholas Browning seemed to have it all. He was an honor student, a Boy Scout, a talented athlete at Delaney High School. His father was a respected attorney, and his mother was a homemaker. However, beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect life, unresolved issues and tensions were brewing. After his arrest, Nicholas claimed that he suffered abuse from his father both physically and psychologically. Prosecutors, on the other hand, argued that he committed the murders to avoid being told what to do and to secure his inheritance by eliminating every member of his family.
I have a very large, or had whatever, inheritance coming to me, regardless if there's insurance money involved or not.
Yet even after saying that in the interrogation, Nicholas kept denying this. And in court, he stated, "My home life had become much more toxic to myself than I ever thought possible." January 2009, Nicholas ended up pleading guilty to 4 counts of first-degree murder. Now, before his sentencing, a defense psychiatrist testified that his parents physically and verbally abused him, and he suffered from a dissociative disorder and was in a trance-like state during the shootings. However, state psychiatrists found Browning had no diagnosable mental illnesses. Prosecutors would play a phone call of a conversation between Nicholas and a friend named Stephanie that he made from jail. During the call, he told her, "I hate justice. You need to break in here and break me out." He also asked her if she had heard about a convicted killer who recently escaped from a Maryland prison and told her that it would be him sometime next year. After presenting the call, the prosecutor said, "These are hardly the words of someone racked with guilt and remorse. These are the words of a dangerous killer." Nicholas was ultimately sentenced to 4 life terms in prison, with 2 life terms to be served consecutively. That means he may become eligible for parole in 2031 after serving 23 years. With good behavior. He's currently incarcerated at Western Correctional Institution in Cumberland, Maryland. And while serving time behind bars, Nicholas has been described as a model prisoner, showing a great deal of remorse and guilt for his past actions. He has found solace in reading and writing. Now recently, Nicholas was honored with the 2021 Media for a Just Society Award. In the media by a person who's incarcerated category, his essay, Little Gardens, focusing on juvenile lifers, was published by PEN America and took first place in the essay category of their prison writing contest. After receiving the award, Nicholas said in this interview, "My fate is very much deserved. I took the lives of those closest to me, my own family, and there's nothing I can do to change that horrifying truth. No amount of good work can ever balance out my ledger." July 22, 2015, two brothers, Robert Bever, 18, and Michael Bever, 16, committed this horrific crime in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. They murdered their parents and 3 siblings, making it the deadliest mass murder in the city's history. The chaos began around 11:30 p.m. when a 911 call was made by Daniel Bever, who reported that his older brothers were attacking the family. The call was filled with screams and commotion before the line went dead.
My brother's attacking my family.
Your dad is attacking your family?
No, my brother.
Police were sent to the Bever family home, and upon arrival, they found blood on the porch. They heard a faint cry for help inside the house and forced their way in. Inside, they discovered Crystal Bever, who had been stabbed multiple times. They quickly pulled her to safety and then found the bodies of David Bever, his wife April, and 3 of their children, including Daniel, who had made the 911 call. Crystal ended up surviving the killings, but was critically injured from her wounds. She identified 2 of her brothers as the assailants, saying they lured her to a bedroom before slitting her throat and stabbing her in the stomach and arms. The 2 killers fled the scene through the back door of the house when the police showed up and headed towards the woods behind the property. They didn't get far though, as police quickly caught up with a K-9 unit and took them into custody. After the tragic incident, neighbors revealed that the Bever parents homeschooled their kids and kept them isolated from the community. Their lifestyle was so secretive that some neighbors didn't even know their full names until the massacre. Later on, defense attorneys claimed that David Bever was abusive toward his children, both physically and verbally. According to Crystal's testimony, Robert also said that his parents were abusive to him and his siblings, often talking about their hatred for certain people and referring to Armageddon as a retribution for everything they hated about the world. But this wasn't the only reason behind the boys' heinous plan. Robert had confessed to the murders during his interrogation, revealing that he and his brother planned to dismember their family's bodies, stash them in storage bins in the attic, steal the family car, and randomly shoot and kill 5 people at different locations, aiming for a body count of at least 50. Robert also admitted to idolizing serial killers, wanting to strike outside of Oklahoma, and hoping to reach a body count of 500 or more. These brothers were eventually charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of assault and battery with intent to kill. Surprisingly, the brothers chose to plead not guilty to the charges against them. However, Robert Bever quickly changed his plea and admitted guilt to all charges, receiving 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. On the other hand, Michael went to trial and was found guilty. He also received 5 life sentences, but with the chance of parole. Robert's violent tendencies followed him into prison. While incarcerated, he attempted suicide by hanging himself with a bedsheet, but was saved by a guard during a routine check. He was unharmed and placed on suicide watch for a while. July 15th, 2019, another incident. Robert tried to attack 2 prison staff members, a psychological clinician, and social service specialists, with a shiv. But luckily, social service put Robert in a bear hug and took that weapon away from him, so no one got seriously hurt. On November 17th, 2020, Robert was sentenced to 3 additional life terms. He's currently serving that time at the Joseph Harp Correctional Center, with no chance of ever being released. February 14th, 2018, 19-year-old Nicholas Cruz unleashed terror at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Armed with an AR, he would open fire on students and staff, tragically claiming the lives of 17 people and injuring 17 others. This horrific event stands as one of the deadliest school shootings in U.S. history. But who the hell is Nicholas Cruz and what drove him to commit such a heinous act? On September 24, 1998, Cruz entered the world to Brenda Norma Woodward, a violent felon and drug addict. Placed in an orphanage at birth, he was later adopted by Roger and Linda Cruz. Sadly, both his adoptive parents had passed away, leaving Cruz orphaned just again 3 months before the tragic shooting. Now, Cruz's grief was not the only factor contributing to him committing the mass murder. Struggling with ADHD and ODD, Cruz faced numerous challenges throughout his school years, including threats and expulsions. By 2016, he came under investigation for disturbing Snapchat posts and threats to purchase guns. Despite the red flags everywhere, authorities deemed him a low risk for harming himself or others. A year later, Cruz followed up on his threats, acquiring that firearm that he would later use in the shooting. Despite all the warning signs, authorities missed the opportunities to intervene and prevent the tragedy. On September 24, 2017, a chilling comment would appear on a YouTube video from a user named Nicholas Cruz, stating, "I'm gonna be a professional school shooter." This comment was reported to the FBI, and they were unable to identify the individual behind the threat. The FBI. In just under 2 months before the shooting took place, the FBI again would receive a tip about Cruz's gun ownership, desire to harm people, erratic behavior, and even his disturbing social media posts. There was rumors spreading about him carrying out a school shooting. However, after some type of investigation, the FBI stated that the tip line didn't follow protocol, so no further investigative steps were taken. Now it's February 14th, 2018, and Cruz is ready to follow on his threats. He enters his former school and opens fire on students and staff, resulting in the deaths of 17 people and injuring 17 others. He then fled the scene on foot, blending in with the other students, but was arrested about an hour and 20 minutes later. Cruz was given 17 counts of first-degree murder and 17 counts of attempted first-degree murder. On November 2nd, 2022, Cruz was sentenced to 34 consecutive life terms with no chance of parole.
I hope your ever-breathing moment here on earth is miserable, and you repent for your sins, Nicholas, and burn in hell.
During his sentencing, Cruz remained emotionless, much like he did on the day of the shooting. He probably had that same look when he attacked a prison guard while awaiting trial. November 13th, 2018, County Sheriff Sergeant Raymond Beltran was supervising Cruz's recreation period. Cruz, dressed in his orange jail uniform and shower slippers, was walking laps around some tables, while Beltran sat behind a desk a few feet away. Nicholas suddenly stopped and looked at Raymond, who had simply advised Cruz to watch his step in his slippers, concerned he might make a tumble. But Cruz responded by flashing both of his middle fingers before launching himself at the guard, knocking him to the ground. In the scuffle that followed, Cruz managed to pull Beltran's taser from its holster. That taser went off, but luckily those electric probes missed their mark. Raymond would grab his weapon back and used it to deliver a shocking blow to Cruz, staggering him. Eventually, Nicholas was subdued, handcuffed, and escorted back to his cell. After being convicted, Cruz was moved to an undisclosed maximum security prison, where he spends most of his time in solitary confinement in a tiny cell that will forever be his home. November 30th, 2021. Another tragic mass shooting takes place at Oxford High School in Oxford Township, Michigan. 15-year-old Ethan Robert Crumbley used a 9mm semi-automatic handgun to kill 4 students and injure 8 others. The motive, you ask? Well, you'll be surprised when you learn that his parents had a hand in it. April 28, 2006, Ethan Crumbley was born in Atlantic Beach, Florida. His parents, Jennifer and James, had previous run-ins with the law for DUI and check fraud between 1995 and 2005. By 2014, after moving to Michigan, neighbors had reported that Ethan was often left home alone without a phone, while his parents went out to bars in downtown Lake Orion. A concerned neighbor would even make an anonymous complaint to Child Protective Services, but it's unclear if any actions were taken at that time. Things would take a turn for the worse when Ethan's only friend moved away in October 2021, and then the family dog passed away, leaving him feeling utterly depressed. By March of that same year, he began sending disturbing texts to his mother about demons and ghosts in the house. He also engaged in troubling behavior like torturing animals, making Molotov cocktails, and even sketching out plans plans for a school shooting. But despite all these warning signs, Ethan's parents never sought therapy for him. What's more, before the shooting, Crumbley had met with the school's officials twice to talk about his behavior. The first meeting happened after a teacher saw him looking up ammunition on his phone. Crumbley had mentioned that he and his mom had recently gone to a shooting range, and that shooting was a family hobby. School officials tried to reach out to Crumbley's mom, Jennifer, but she didn't respond. Instead, she messaged her son saying, "LOL, I'm not mad at you. You have to learn not to get caught." Now, the second meeting took place on the day of the shooting, after a teacher found a disturbing drawing on Crumbley's desk. It showed a gun pointing at the words, "The thoughts won't stop. Help me." Crumbley was taken to the counselor's office and his parents were called to come to the school. When they arrived, they saw the drawing, but didn't mention that they had recently also bought a gun for him. So Crumbley was sent right back to class that morning. Who could have known that he had already hidden a gun somewhere and planned to use it on the school grounds? Around 12:50 p.m., Crumbley snuck into the bathroom and came out a minute later with the semi-auto handgun he had hidden. He would open fire in the hallway at students rushing from one class to another. He walked down that hallway, shooting into classrooms and at anyone who couldn't escape. Luckily, students and staff had acted quickly by locking the doors, preventing him from entering any classroom. Despite this, 4 students were tragically killed, and 8 others, including a teacher, were injured. After catching him, he pled guilty to 24 charges, including 4 counts of first-degree murder. On December 9, 2023, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Before the sentencing, he apologized to the courtroom and stated, "Any sentence that the victims ask for, I ask that you do impose it on me." Ethan's parents were also arrested and charged with involuntary manslaughter for their negligence and lack of action. They received a 15-year sentence, eligible for parole after 10. After all is said and done, Ethan was taken to the Thumb Correctional Facility in Michigan, where he continued causing trouble. On March 19, 2024, he got into a fight with another inmate in the youthful housing unit. Staff intervened quickly and no weapons were used. After turning 18 in April, Ethan was moved to a max security prison, and he's likely kept in isolation. May 2007, 16-year-old high school student Alec Kreider committed a horrific crime by murdering his classmate and friend Kevin Haynes, along with Kevin's parents, Thomas and Lisa Haynes, in their home in Manheim Township, Pennsylvania. His motive? Well, according to his journal, Kreider did it because he hated happy people. Back in February 4th, 1991, Alec Devon Kreider was born to Timothy Scott Kreider and Angela Parsons Kreider. He had grown up with mental health issues, including severe anger problems. He even tried strangling his own brother when he was younger. Kreider was a sophomore at Manheim Township High School, but he didn't have many close friends, except for one, Kevin Haynes. They were together in German class, and Kreider often visited Kevin at his family home. But how could have Kevin known that he was taking home a ticking time bomb disguised as a friend? On May 12, 2007, Kevin entered the Haynes home without force, stabbing Kevin's parents while they slept. Thomas was killed, and Lisa was severely wounded. Kreider then went up to Kevin's room, where a struggle ensued, resulting in Kevin's death. He then returned to Lisa and slit her throat before fleeing the scene. The Haynes' older daughter, Maggie, who was home from college, woke up to a loud noise and the smell of blood. She ran to a neighbor's house who called 911, and when they returned to the Haynes home, they were met with a gruesome scene. After a month of intense national and regional media coverage and speculation, including tracking by bloodhounds and an intensive search by Pennsylvania State Police cadets, Kreider was finally arrested. This happened after Alec Kreider's father told the authorities that his son had admitted to the murders. Alec pled guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder and received 3 consecutive life sentences without parole. Due to his age at the time of the crime, he couldn't be given the death penalty. After sentencing, Kreider was taken to the State Correctional Institution at Camp Hill in Pennsylvania, a maximum security facility. He was kept in administrative segregation from the moment he arrived until the day he decided to take his own life. January 20th, 2017, just 15 days before his 26th birthday, Alec Kreider was found hanging in his cell. Despite trying to revive him, he was pronounced dead shortly after being discovered. At the time of his death, Alec was part of a group of juvenile offenders from Lancaster County who were eligible for resentencing following a Supreme Court ruling that deemed mandatory life sentences without parole for juveniles unconstitutional. And to this day, it's unclear why he had decided to take his own life. December 30th, 1974, 17-year-old Anthony Barbaro, an honor student and a member of the Olean High School rifle team in Olean, New York, went on a shooting spree from the third-floor windows of the school building. The chaos would begin in the afternoon when Anthony took his mother's car, telling his brother that he was going target shooting. He arrived at Olean High School around 2:50 p.m. After entering through a side door, he made his way to the third floor, where he set off a homemade explosive. When he couldn't get into the student council room, Barbaro shot the lock, went inside, and barricaded himself. Meanwhile, custodians were working in the school's basement when they heard a fire alarm. Earl Metcalf was sent to investigate and encountered Barbaro on the third floor. Ignoring warnings from another custodian, Metcalf approached Barbaro, who shot him and killed him before taking aim at others outside the school. By 5:20 p.m., local and state police officers had surrounded the building, and a National Guard tank had arrived to help remove the injured victims. Before nightfall, 2 NY State police officers entered the school and threw tear gas into the student council room, where they found Barbaro unconscious wearing a defective gas mask. At first, police couldn't find any clear motive for his actions. However, a teammate from the school's rifle team remembers Barbaro mentioning his desire to hold up the Olean army and have a standoff with the police. Also, before the shooting, Barbaro had tried out for the bowling team but didn't make the cut. Later on, in a note explaining his motives, Anthony wrote, "I guess I just wanted to kill the person I hate most, myself. I just don't have the courage. I wanted to die, but I couldn't do it, so I had to get someone to do it for me. It didn't work out." On December 31st, 1974, Anthony Barbaro was charged with 3 counts of second-degree murder, 6 counts of first-degree assault, and 5 counts of first-degree reckless endangerment. He pled not guilty by reason of insanity, but 2 court-appointed psychiatrists deemed him fit to stand trial. Anthony was eventually moved to the Cattaraugus County Jail to await his trial. On November 1st, 1975, he tragically took his own life by hanging himself with a bedsheet in his cell. Before his death, though, Barbaro left 3 suicide notes, one for his family, another for a woman he had been corresponding with in prison, and the third was addressed to whom it may concern. The third note read, "People aren't afraid to die. It's just how they die. I don't fear death, but rather the pain, but no more. I regret the foods I'll never taste, the music I'll never hear, the sights I'll never see, the accomplishments I'll never accomplish. In other words, I regret my life. Some will ask why. I don't know. No one will." February 1999, Sean Sellers, an American mass murderer, was executed. Now, he was one of 22 people in the U.S. to be executed for a crime committed while under the age of 18, since the death penalty was reinstated. March 5th, 1986, 16-year-old Sean Sellers killed his mom, Vonda Belafato, and his stepfather, Lee Belafato, while they were asleep in their Oklahoma City home. Now, Sellers tried to make it look like an intruder had committed the killings, but his story never convinced police. He was arrested the same day and confessed to the murders. So during questioning, Sellers also admitted to killing convenience store clerk Robert Bauer a year earlier with his friend Richard Howard. He said he did it because Bauer wouldn't sell him beer and he wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone. So he shot Bauer while he was drinking coffee and then chased him down and shot him again. At his trial, Sellers claimed that he was practicing Satanism and blamed demonic possession for his actions. The jury didn't buy that crap, so he got sentenced to death that same year. Now, back then, Oklahoma law didn't let juries give out life sentences without the possibility of parole. One juror thought that Sellers would be out in 7 to 14 years, which wasn't long enough. So they went for the death penalty. Now, while in prison, Sellers had become a Christian. His friends would make a website for him and try to get him clemency based on his newfound faith, age, and past involvement in Satanism. In 1999, Sellers went to the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals saying that he had a multiple personality disorder. The judges concluded that while Sellers might have been insane at the time of his crimes, the claim was made too late to be raised on appeal. The psychiatric experts who evaluated the case didn't really help things either. They argued that any true mental illness would have been diagnosed soon after Sellers' arrest, and not 7 years later. Prison officials wouldn't buy his story either, because they said they saw him rehearsing his symptoms and getting coached by his lawyers. Now, Sellers tried the same trick again with the Clemency Board, but they too shut his case down. He would also appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, but declined. 2 days before the execution, Sellers filed 2 more appeals. Again, both denied. February 4th, 1999. Sellers was executed by lethal injection at 12:17 a.m. 5 years after the execution, the U.S. Supreme Court rules that it is unconstitutional to execute someone for a crime committed when they were under the age of 18. Our final stop is in February 27, 2012, at 7:30 a.m. when 17-year-old TJ Lane walked into Chardon High School in Chardon, Ohio, and wore a sweatshirt with the word killer on it. He quickly started shooting at a group of students. Despite growing up in an all-American town in the Midwest, Thomas Michael Lane III wasn't raised in a happy home. His father, Thomas Lane Jr., had a history of violence against women, including Lane's mother, and due to this, his parents would lose custody of him, so he was sent to live with his grandparents. Lane was described as reserved by his classmates at Chardon High School. He didn't talk about his family issues. He didn't have many friends and didn't belong to any groups. One student said, "He seemed like a very normal, just teenage boy. He did have a sad look in his eyes a lot of the time, but he talked normally. He never said anything strange." However, Lane did have a dark side, as evidenced by a disturbing Facebook post he made 2 months before the shooting. "I am death, and you have always been the sod. Now, feel death, not just mocking you, not just stalking you, but inside of you." Now, this did raise an eyebrow or two, but no one could have really predicted the tragedy that would happen next. On February 27, 2012, the nightmare of Chardon High School would begin at approximately 7:30 a.m. At this time, Lane had stormed the cafeteria, where many students were gathered before morning class, and opened fire. By the time the rampage was over, Lane took the lives of 3 students and severely injured 2 others before being tackled by a teacher and a coach. His trial went as expected. He was quickly tried and convicted of the crime and was given 3 life sentences, but it would all be about his behavior in the courtroom that made the headlines. During his sentencing, Lane wore a shirt with the word killer written on it, taunting his victims, and even stuck up a middle finger towards them. This defective child was sent to Allen Correctional Institution, Lima, Ohio, where he proved to be just as much of a troubled kid as he was in high school. Reports from inside revealed that he had been disciplined at least 7 times for such behavior as urinating on the walls, getting a tattoo, self-mutilation, and even refusing to perform assigned prison tasks. By September 11, 2014, Lane had escaped that prison, along with 2 others. In response to that escape, Chardon High School was shut down out of concern for student safety, although it would take just 24 hours for Lane to be apprehended without incident. Now this kid is spending the rest of his days in administrative segregation at Warren Correctional Institution, which is a supermax prison.